Ladies and germs, welcome back. I didn't see you there. You kind of scared me. I didn't thought I was alone. We're back today. We've got Mike from Turn Leftist, like always. He's the co-host. Today we got Noah Khrachvik back in the house. What's going on? Midwestern Marx.
How you doing, brother? It's good to be back. Been watching your work and following it actually pretty closely. I read your Medium articles and they're very good. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're the best. We love to see the content you guys are putting out because we're all comrade in arms. We're trying to wake the people up, deprogram a lot of this old, stuff. But I wanted to tell you, so I've had Vijay Prashad on the program. I had him on before. Took a while for him to get back on because I would email him, right? And I would say, hey, had a good time on the show. Here's the link. No response. Gave him a holiday card. So here's a holiday card. Palestine thing broke out. I go, hey, you want to come on the show? Talk about Palestine. Crickets, nothing. So I didn't hear from him for 2 years. Finally, I go, did I say something wrong? I apologize and stuff, and then nothing. And then I finally said, you know what? You talk like Noam Chomsky, but you act like Ayn Rand. And he just wrote back, he says, that's harsh. And I go, yeah. Well, there you go. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. I said what I needed to say, and here he comes. He's coming back. So he says, get in touch.
Sometimes you just got to annoy people into doing what you need them to do.
Yeah. That's the kind of communism I like, just
aggressive.
Yeah, aggressive.
The annoying kind.
Yeah. You're going to do this and you're going to like it. So tell me a little bit about what's been recent at the what you've been working on at Midwestern Marx, because I know that you guys had an event that everybody came out and gave speeches and stuff. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a really, really good event. It launched the Institute for a Free America, which is a think tank put together by our friends at Infrared and by Haas specifically, and Jackson Hinkle. And this was sort of the launch event that we were very honored. They asked us to come and contribute and do presentations. So it was all on, obviously, with a genocide going on, you can't not talk about Palestine. So especially when we're in Dearborn, Michigan, which is where we held the event, it's sort of the Arab capital of the U.S., right? And so the name of the event was Free America to Free Palestine, right? To sort of focus on, well, it's all well and good to protest. We think, the students, for example, protesting are heroic, especially as they're getting funding removed from them and that sort of things, getting arrested, beaten by cops. But how far can protest go, right? When we're talking about fighting against a genocide and making our voices count, we're automatically talking about taking the fight to our government, because it's our government that is enabling and funding this genocide. And so in order to free Palestine, we have to free America, because these are the same forces that are responsible for the murder of countless, Palestinian children, that are responsible for the American standard of living declining so rapidly in our era, and for the fact that, the vast majority of us work paycheck to paycheck. The vast majority of us spend, 8 hours a day, if not more, making someone else rich. The vast majority of us have a zero or less than zero net worth. Home ownership rates are plummeting, and it's getting very bad here. And so the whole idea was to point out to people that this is one common struggle of different forms against the same forces. It's all, no matter what form it takes, class struggle.
Yeah. And it all comes back to the chickens come home to roost. Look, and this ties into imperialism, because a lot of people think imperialism doesn't affect them. But in reality, when you start talking about, well, why do we have this sudden drop off in standard of living, but then want to say, hey, well, we got to send more money to these satellite states. Like, do we really, though?
Yeah, it's weird. I've even heard a sort of left-wing version of trickle-down economics, right? where people say the U.S. is evil, of course, but they don't, put the class analysis into that and say, well, it's the ruling class doing these things, and they're actually extracting money from us, the working class here, in order to, engage in proxy wars and the genocide of the Palestinians and all of this. They look at it a little flippy floppy, right? They see that capital comes into the U.S. through these sort of, and they don't really understand monetary imperialism, but that's okay. We'll forgive them that. But they just see like imperialism as the extraction of wealth from other countries. And then with a lack of class analysis, they go, well, all of that wealth trickles down to the working class. So that's why, people here are sometimes reactionary or war hawkish or whatever it is. And it's just very silly. It's not true.
No, trickle-down economics sounds vaguely like a golden shower anyway. It doesn't sound promising.
No, you don't think that the average American sort of implicitly understands their place in the world, and that knowing that all of their stuff comes from like sweatshops around the world, you don't think that they kind of, whether they're on the conservative side and they think that the military-industrial complex is just keeping order and then protecting them from those brown hordes that are working in the sweatshops, giving them all their cheap goods, or if they're on the liberal side and they think that those brown people will eventually live in, splendor the way we do here, they just think it's going to take another 150 years of neoliberal free market capitalism, I guess, wherever the liberal line is.
You got to work really, really hard, though, if you're going to make it.
Yeah, they got to really pull up those bootstraps like super hard. But I mean, don't you think that actually
large bootstraps, right?
Yeah, very large.
Like, how does that factor in with your class analysis of? Because I wouldn't call that trickle down. I just think that is what prevents people from being really revolutionary in the U.S. It's not that people in the U.S. don't know that like militant revolutionary action is the way forward, and it's not even that they don't have guns. They have more than everyone else in the world. They just, in my opinion and my like analysis of this over the last few years of watching Americans react to all these declining living conditions, it seems that like as long as they're convinced that they have it better off than the global South, they don't really have that revolutionary energy because they have that release valve or the threat, I suppose.
It's a good point.
What's interesting, that reminds me a little bit, the man we call the father of American Marxism, W.E.B. Du Bois, right? He talks about this in regards to the color line here in America, right? That the ruling class, through the relations created by chattel slavery, was able to create this sort of what we call the false consciousness of racism, where you had, poor Southern whites, especially, somehow seeing themselves as more similar to the slave-owning planter class than the black proletarians doing the same sort of work as them, living the same sort of lives as them, with the same material interests as them. And, Du Bois explains all of this, but in regards to right now, I think that people are sort of waking up to the fact that things are getting bad here. And it's a process that's happening right now. I wouldn't say that, well, let me take a step back. We view America in stages of history, right? And the period before ours, we call the period of the middle classes, right? Where for the first time in history, because the state in America became something of a finance capitalist itself and instituted all of these sort of protectionist trade policies, while at the same time engaging in monetary imperialism and, currency devaluations of other countries, and ending up in the 70s forcing other countries to actually finance our deficit and military adventurism. But all of that created in the mid 20th century, the early 20th century, as it was happening, a new phenomenon in class society that had never happened before, where you saw directly because of class struggle, because of communists specifically building the CIO, because of the Black Freedom Movement, you saw sections of the working class lose a sort of revolutionary proletarian characteristic, right? Where what Marx proves in Capital is that it's mathematically impossible for the proletariat's living standard to not drop down to the absolute lowest it can be. In fact, Engels says that owning a home makes one no longer proletarian at all. When he's talking about the working class in England, and they were going through a process he called bourgeoisification, right? And so in this period of history, because of the absolute massive amount of centralized capital within the state and within the big banks, alongside the threat of communism in the East, the Soviet revolution had happened, and militant class struggle here, we saw big sections of the proletariat lose that characteristic where they're thrust down to that level of precarity and raise up into a middle class, right? And this had never happened before, and it's sort of confused Marxists since then, right? And only now that that's ending, that people are getting thrust back down into that precarity, can we take a step back because the process has completed itself or is completing itself and see what actually happened, and we call what's happening now reproletarianization. The only issue with it is when proletarianization was happening at the dawn of industrial capital, there was a constantly expanding mass of bourgeois factories. We don't have that in imperialist nations anymore. People become consumers and little else, thrust into sort of service jobs and things like this that could easily be automated, right? But they're needed as consumers. And the contradiction between that consumption being necessary, right, to spur on production all over the world in the whole global complex, and the fact that wages cannot rise anymore, which is accelerated by COVID and by the wars that are continuing on, especially by the proxy war against Russia, is leaving us at this real impossible to move forward moment. And that's what at Midwestern Marx Institute we call the objective revolutionary conditions approaching us in the U.S. What's missing for us is the subjective factor, right? Because of exactly what you were talking about, Mike, the false consciousness instilled in people during that period of the middle classes. We have all of this ideological baggage that we need to undo. And that takes, organization, education, and dedication. I'm sorry for the big ramble, but it's a complicated topic, I guess.
I'm like Ralph Wiggum over here. I'm learning.
I guess I just don't know. I'm not sure where we would, where our views differ in what you just said. Like, I agree, I think, with everything that you said. I just, I guess I'm not understanding like where that leads us to our different conclusions as to what to do from that point. But
that's the thing is where we're talking about whether or not people are too distracted to actually get up and do something about their lower state of their sliding standard of living. And this is there's no way to know for sure. Mike is on the contention that people are like it's hopeless to some degree. Like people are so wrapped up. And don't
misread me, but
I won't misread you. But for me, I agree with this premise in the sense like Ted Kaczynski once wrote, eventually capitalism and everything like this will get to a point where the technological advancements that keep us placated will be so amazing and so fantastic, pharmacologically, or even, your Nintendo playing video games, whatever. These modern things will keep us so engrossed, and the neoliberal kind of ultra, what do you call it, exhibitionist, individualist, look at me, I need to be a unique individual, and the toxicity that has is playing into that. And I had a guy on talk about antidepressants. I said, could antidepressants be hindering a kind of a Marxist uprising? Maybe, I don't know, but
could opiates be the opiates of the masses? Like,
yeah, right? Exactly.
My one of the other directors at the Institute got a master's in healthcare administration, and this is something he's gone into very, very in depth. Is the Sackler family, right?
Oh,
they're
wow.
a ruling class cartel, and they're directly responsible for the opiate epidemic, and it's absolutely hindering people. If you get people addicted to drugs and into this life of crime, or declassed, as Marx and Engels called it, into what they called the dangerous class or the lumpen proletariat, their material interest towards revolution change, right? They're more on this individual. They need the drugs. They need to prey upon people, and it's a gross thing to happen. And the seculars are directly responsible. So
Yeah.
I think our disagreement maybe is only on the potential or capacity of the American people for change.
So what do you guys think in a nutshell? I mean, Noah, is it possible?
Absolutely. I think that's what all of history shows. But I think that change only comes because it's necessary, not because we all have good ideas or because, like we all agree that, yes, Marxism is a correct world outlook. That's less important than the fact that it can't continue on in the old way. And I think that's what we're approaching now. And when we see things like MAGA, when we see things like the Bernie movement, it's the ideological baggage that we all have from that last period of history, giving us sort of these misdirections and easy, what we think are solutions to the problems. But as it turns out, as time goes on, we realize that they're not. We need to sort of, rather than be told that this is how it is, experience the failures of bourgeois politics for ourselves, basically.
Yeah. That very well could be. I mean, but at the same time, technologically, we're moving forward. We've got new weaponry to oppress people, new, like I said, new technology. Mike, what do you think?
I don't think there's a lot of like socialist revolutionary potential in America, like among Americans.
He's a cynic, folks.
Fascist revolutionary potential. It seems like we're pretty much on the cusp of that at any given moment. It's like, and I don't think of it as like a national collapse thing, because I feel like something about the U.S. or just the first world or the West in general doesn't allow for that. Like, it's too individualistic, and people are too content to going to work and getting coffee and hanging out with their friends while the town next to them even is in utter collapse. Like, I just reference natural disasters like Katrina or any of the dozens that have happened over the last couple decades and happened with increasing frequency. Like, look at Hawaii. It's like Hawaii is still like going on about their business for the most part, even though they were recently very devastated. And then it breeds conspiracy theories among like the crazy fascists, about blue roofs or whatever. It's like, that's going to be their reaction to increasing climate change and declining living conditions. And it feels like the U.S. is just going to, in my opinion, the U.S. already is fascist, and it's going to keep going in that direction. And if there is any salvation, it's going to come from the global South and the third world. And so I feel like it's like, I'm not trying to like be spicy or start a crazy debate, but like from my point of view, like the Midwestern Marx people, maybe not so much them as like Has and Jackson Hinkle, like they're making a calculation, and probably a pretty astute one, where they're staking their side now. They're saying like, look, we don't like trans people or the LGBT people. We don't like.
Is that true?
Certain things about like. This is just. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But this is
Hinkle's
just like
a
my
spicy guy.
estimation.
Jake Shields is anti. He's like, I'm pro Palestine, but fuck gay people. I'm like, dude, take it easy.
Yeah,
But
no,
Hinkle,
I know. I
as
know
long as
Jackson.
Hinkle's on point, when Hinkle's on point, I'm like, okay, you're on point. But you do remind me of somebody that beat me up in high school.
I know Jackson. He's not like that at all. He doesn't care who you are, and especially I know Hawes's views on this quite well, because he did a debate with this guy Daniel Tutton, and he explained them, right? That for him, it's not. No one cares whether someone's gay or queer or whatever they want to do. The issue is trying to force things on others and sort of alleviate, like, hide the class struggle from view, right? And sort of push this class collaborationist along whatever your sort of sexual proclivities thing is, right? So
Yeah.
middle class, working class, ruling class, as long as you're gay, you're all on the same team.
Right.
But that's
Peter
not
Thiel,
the way
good
the
to
world
go.
works. Right. Like, is Caitlyn Jenner, because she's trans, with us? Of course not. Right? Uses some of the most barbaric sweatshop labor there is. But she also won Woman of the Year. And I think what Infrared does that I think is, and Haas has said, like, they maybe went a little too far on this in the past, got a little too trolly. that kind of stuff. But points out that our ruling class is very much okay with this stuff and actually pushes it. I mean, if you look at Kamala Harris, her meetings all have pronoun checks. They do, all the performative sort of leftist virtue signaling. Our ruling class is doing that, and I think he's right about that. And we have to sort of soberly acknowledge that instead of the sort of leftist dismissal, which is all, oh well, they're lying about it.
Yeah,
They're lying. Right.
Yeah. I think me and Mike are saying is like you got to watch really closely what's hate speech, but also like me and Mike, we had this conversation right about speech doesn't really, it's not important. Like this policing of the speech and stuff like this. If anything, it's detrimental. But at the same time, I hate the culture war. I hate that it's so contrived. I hate that they fucking put rainbows on everything and say, well, it's okay to be imperialist as long as there's rainbows on stuff. Right. But at the same time, then there's a real threat that people are taking this rhetoric and running with it and saying, I can't wait to beat up some gay people or whatever. Like,
I would push back on that a little bit. Like, I don't even particularly hate the culture war so much, or hate that there are rainbow flags on things, or that it's being forced in any way on anyone. I think that's just people trying to find acceptance wherever they can, and they're reacting to what do you call alienation under capitalism the way any of us would. They just still have like probably a liberal individualist mindset where they're putting their identity politics above class struggle.
Sure,
but that's not to excuse people that I'm seeing who, and this may just be the fan base, but I don't think that people like Henkel and House are doing enough to push those people away. But like, there's a lot of transphobia in their comment sections and in their streams and everything. Like, I see that shit happening, and it doesn't seem like it is a unintentional or a misstep. Like, it seems to me like it is a intentional calculation on the part of these people who understand what I do, which is that if there's some kind of collapse, whether it's localized to different cities or whether it's bigger across the nation, and we see some kind of like real nationwide collapse or revolutionary moment, that like the right wing, they have all the guns, they hate trans people, they hold hands with the cops and the police and the military, the National Guard, all the justice system people, the prison guards and everything. They're all fucking MAGA people. And I feel like a lot of the MAGA quote unquote communists have made that calculation, and they've, like I said, put their flag in the ground now while things are going good, because they see that the way that things could possibly go. And I also think, to tie this into like what do we do going forward, I understand sort of why they say like, oh, we support Trump or whatever, because they want to troll the liberals. And liberals are the people who are supposed to be on our side during the Biden presidency. That is no different than Trump was. It's just as bad for marginalized people. It's just as fascist as Trump was. And all the liberals went back to brunch. So I understand why they sort of say we support Trump, because at least when he gets back into office, the liberals will care again, and they will be anti-fascist and out in the streets with BLM once again, like they have not been. But I think they would be better served if, instead of saying, look, we support Trump because we actually want to make America great again, if they said we support Trump because we want America to burn, we want America to die. Like, that's what I go online and say.
That's reasonable.
I'm pissing off everyone.
That's
and it's
reasonable.
like, but I also say, like, it doesn't really matter if Biden or Trump gets in office, because either way, America will get worse. And it's like, it's not even a matter of how fast. Like, that is the only option for America, is to decline, because it is a decaying capitalist empire. And my position is just that the U.S. is the Fourth Reich without the U.S. to save it, with Operation Gladio and Paperclip and all the other operations that it did before. So we're now in this unique position where the one fascist global hegemon is falling. So we would be wise to support the anti-imperialist blocs without supporting reactionary elements here in the U.S. and like American patriotism that is rooted in white nationalism.
Well,
okay, I need to comment real quick, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would suggest reading Haas's Substack on what they say MAGA communism is, because I think you're under a few misconceptions about what they think and their stances. They don't support Trump, for instance. Why
do they call it that then?
What's that?
Why do they call it MAGA communism then?
Well, because what they say is that MAGA is a spontaneous working class movement that has the false consciousness of the entire last period of history. And they talk about it as a turning point in politics, which it also is, right? And that if you actually talk to Trump voters, they're regular people for the most part. They're not fascists. They're not evil, They're not. They
Little
don't hate
slow,
trans or gay
maybe.
people.
I mean, some of them are fascist.
Not really at all. In fact, when you see
Well,
the
fascism exists in all of us. You got to remember that. It just can come out at different times. It's a primitive instinct built into us. It's just how well we,
Maybe you, bro.
is that the
Bro.
is that the Adorno view?
You should see me after a few drinks, bro. I'm
Oh,
a
no.
fucking yeah. Go on. Go ahead.
I work with these guys, and every single one that I've talked to is now on board for communism, and it's very, very easy when we're not judgmental or sort of telling them they hate or think things that they don't to get them on board. And they're already skeptical of the media. It's very simple to just go, okay, apply that to communism, apply that to China, apply that to Russia, apply that to the entire subject. Ask me what I think, just like I'm asking you what you think. And at the end of the day, working class people just want to be able to live stable, peaceful lives. And if you present a better solution than the ruling class, you'll get them on board. And the thing is, we have the only solution, right? There is no solution that can possibly come from the ruling class. I
like this. You know why I like this is because this is actually strategic, right? This is actually these whoever it is, you guys or whoever has this idea to go after the Trump demographic is smart because you're like you said, these are working class people. They have every right in the world to hear about this. We don't want to gatekeep this, and definitely they're going to be so susceptible. If you stripped away the word communism and told them what it's all about and say, look, everybody gets to vote in this business. Businesses run like this. Yeah, everybody gets to vote. There's no leader. It'll be great. Zappos does it. You got all these fucking capitalist companies that are already doing it. They're doing a great job. You tell these working class people that they will go for it, and it makes it so. And so you're going to have these people in the comment sections doing normal shit, but this is the strategy, right? You're sucking them in. Your brain. What we're doing our own propaganda is we're turning these people on to the fucking real way out of the shithole that we're in. And I'll just say one more thing. The same thing is going on in Europe with this protest. You guys heard about the tractors that they're spraying shit on the sides of the buildings. Well,
They're still doing that? Wow.
Yeah. Every country in Europe has been doing it for like 4 years. What happened was they passed a bunch of regulations that made it harder on the farmer. What happened was, in order for environmental things, which are good, this is a good thing, they had to get it to where the farmers, they took away diesel subsidies, okay? And then they just made it more difficult for the farmer to do what he did. Yada, yada, yada. They come out, they protest. The right-wing government comes out and sees that these people are disaffected. They don't give a fuck about these farmers. They don't care about working class people. They care about enriching their 1% base. But what did they see? They saw an opportunity, a political opportunity to say, let's take this demographic of people, disenchanted. We'll give them something. We'll say that we care just for a second. The AFD does the same thing. When the conspiracy theories came out, who was the first to adopt it? The right wing, the one dirty branch or dirty political party that always needs to coerce working class people to vote against their own best interest to enrich millionaires. So when they find a little niche where they say, well, they really don't like gay people, and they say, oh, let's run with it. Let's tell them that gays are taking over and they're going to make your daughter trans and make them smoke pot. And then all of a sudden you've got them highly motivated to do what you want.
It's like, imagine that the only thing you have informing you is right-wing media. Now, there's some truth that comes out of right-wing media, just like there's some truth that comes out of liberal media. But it's always twisted into the narratives they want to spin, and that is the culture war, getting working-class people all fighting each other. So we're not looking at them. And, I mean, that's been the goal since Madison wrote Federalist Paper number 10, where he laid out that that's what you do to keep the landless proletariat at bay while they're enfranchised with a vote, right?
This guy's got the history. Who did it? John Hamilton? Who was the guy? I got to write this down.
Yeah, Madison wrote Federalist 10. And it was basically the landholding elites were scared, right? Because Jefferson and Paine's ideas on this democratic republic were radical in 1776, incredibly radical. Right? This is one of the first bourgeois republics, and as flawed as it was from the beginning, that's a step forward. And the landholders are terrified of this. Like, well, what do we do of all these landless, like the unwashed rabble? They're going to just vote until they take everything from us. And Madison's like, no, they're not, because they're going to be divided over religion, divided over race, divided over nation, divided, and he lays them out. And that's from the foundation of the country. That's written into what was sort of used to get the Constitution ratified. But that's how the right wing works now, right? Nobody really cares. Like, if you actually ask a Trump voter, do you hate gay people? Do you hate trans people? Every single one will say no, right? What they hate is they are told that the liberal elites, and the elites are liberals, are forcing things into public schools that will teach their kids X and Y, right?
Yeah,
that's what that's what they believe. And so
that's the ostensible reason. People didn't hate black people during civil rights. They just hated black people being forced into their jobs and their public spaces that they were previously segregated. Like, that is always the professed reason. Because people understand, like, cancel culture for whatever it exists. Like, they are afraid of getting fired from their job. So in closed doors, they're going to say the N word and that they hate black people, but they're not going to say they hate gay people. Like, but they're going to say like all kinds of awful shit. I feel like that's like the MAGA communists. Like, when you guys say that you're approaching Republican people and you're able to get them converted to feeling okay with communism, I'd probably be able to do that a lot more effectively if I also was on board with saying, oh, can you believe that they're putting litter boxes in our schools because of the trans people now? It's like, if I had like that to get in on the emotional level with these people with something false like that, like, I probably would have an easier time.
Mike, you got two options. You can either abandon these people and like wage war against them, or you can try to get through to them. And they're still going to say shit like that. They are beyond repair at this point. They have been subjected to this stuff, these talking points that, like you said, the litter box, they repeat it over and they pass it along. It's titillating for them. They don't care about politics, but we care about politics. For them, it's entertainment. And but I think Noah's right. When you ask them, I think they generally don't. And there's a difference between the civil rights movement and the clear corporate capitalist push to look. Trans people make up 1% of the population, and yet they're always talked about in right-wing circles. And it's because Fox News and CNN and all these companies have made it this political football to kick back and forth. And not to say that these people don't deserve peace and love and rights and everything like that. Of course they do. Who would say they wouldn't? And I think I think it's disingenuous to just assume that these people are that way. If Noah here works with them and says that that's not true. I mean, it's
I'm sure not everyone, but I'm just like, I was talking about like demographics of like right-wing people, not necessarily communists. Like, I'm sure there are probably MAGA communists who genuinely don't have any ill will toward LGBT people, but I was talking about like right-wingers, and that's what I mean. It's like, it probably is easier to get your foot in the door with a bunch of right-wingers if you can bypass all of the identity politics, the culture war stuff that really gets to them on an emotional level, and only talk about the economics. Like, I understand why that's working very well for you guys. I just also think that, like, and again, I've been alienating so many leftists. Like, I think a messaging that doesn't center white middle-class saviorism and their comfort as far as like the revolutionary movement is concerned is a lot more threatening to the ruling class, but also I can understand why that is not popular. Like, nobody gives a shit about me saying this. Like, I've been losing followers saying this stuff, so I understand like why mine is not taking off and like the MAGA communism is.
But look, by the time that the communism comes to these Trump people and they agree to it and then they find out what it is, those trans people will have equal rights. There won't be any more racial issues because you'll have your communism. There will be equality across the board. There might be some tribalism still, but that's the point. You need to go after this demographic. I got to side with Noah.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, how could you not? Right? Not only it's a twofer. Not only are you gaining support, but you're taking support away from the ruling class at the same time. That's 2 points because you're taking one away from the other team. It's not about this demographic or that demographic, white, black, whatever. It's about the working class. The material history unfolding is the proletariat coming into being and taking power. That's how history moves forward. Marx and Engels explain this like as a general law of development, right? And it takes different forms depending on where we are in history and where we are geographically, right? You're never going to I've never been able to fuck you anyone into being a communist, right?
Yeah.
What I do instead is I take the rational kernels of their consciousness as proletarian people, as working class people, and redirect it and reframe things in a way they've never seen before, right? Like whenever I say we spend all day making other people rich, that works. Everybody understands that because that's what we do. Right? What I try to do is focus on what unites us, because what the ruling class shoves down our throats is what divides us. And they want us divided, like Madison said, right? Factionalize. So we unite. And Du Bois explains this, and it seems like a contradiction, right? But in regards to the color line, racism has been the number one detriment to class struggle in American history, by far. We call the primary form of class struggle in America's history has been the Black Freedom Movement, right? The Black proletariat's led 2 revolutions already in this country. And so the sort of flip-flop of the color line to where we went from Jim Crow and lynching as the norm to where we are now, where the norm isn't, if not anti-racism, then at least ambivalent acceptance of non-racism, is revolutionary in this country's history, and it happened because of class struggle. It didn't happen for any other reason. And so when you get people involved in fighting for their own interests, no matter where they come from, liberal, conservative, whatever, they end up realizing that there's a lot more that we have in common than not. That all the ideas we all have in our heads about who thinks what, about what type of people, are a lot less important than we all need to eat. We all need a house, right? And just historically, I mean, that's what has played out in this country. I mean, without the black proletariat, there's no such thing as Americans, right? Now tell that to a white guy in 1940, and he'll tell you you're crazy. But here we are, where the largest protest demonstration in the entire nation's history happened a couple years ago when George Floyd was murdered by the state. You know, again, in 1940, that was unthinkable. But it's like, you know, we often say Martin Luther King is America's greatest revolutionary. It's like he says, you know, we may have arrived in different ships, but we're in the same boat now. So we got to figure out a way to paddle that boat.
I can't really get on board with the idea that lynching stopped. Like that whole, like that we moved past the era of lynching.
It slowed down.
Let's say it also mutated. Like LGBT people are getting lynched now. Like there are so many instances of them just getting killed by like mobs of people. Or the laws are structured in a way that like people can kill a gay person or a trans person and say like, I thought I was fooled into like sleeping with this person, and that's like a defense in something like 27 states. It's like a legal defense that they can use. Now it may have varying success, but like still the fact that that is even a law on the books, it's like that would seem to make the case to me that LGBT people are in the place that the marginalized people of color were in during the civil rights struggle that you're saying, when they were the foremost class of the proletariat because they are the most marginalized.
Well, here's the thing: he's not talking about the He's not talking about the culture war, that's not law. There's a difference between the laws that are there and what's the rhetoric that's happening, or like the stuff that the people are doing. Like there should undoubtedly be laws in place to protect these people from discrimination and avoid yourself. You want to avoid the tyranny of the majority. Anytime that there's a majority demographic, a white Anglo-Saxon males with funny hats, they run everything, then everybody else who's different is going to suffer under that. And so that's why communism is so sweet. But until you get communism, you have to have laws on the books that make it a hate crime. Now, this is separate from the idea of being annoyed by capitalists pushing on rainbow flags on you and making you, some of the shootings that have happened recently in gay clubs and stuff, you don't know if this is social contagion because somebody was so keyed up from Fox News fucking 24-hour cycle propaganda that they said, I'm so sick of hearing about gay people, I'm going to go get an AR-47, kill some people. The guy that did it, who said he was non-binary after the fact, he was the grandson of a Republican politician from California. And a Trump nut with one of the Trump hats. He's one of these Trump
So we
guys.
agree that the corporate propaganda against LGBT people is the dangerous thing, and not LGBT propaganda being pushed on anybody to make them accept it.
Why would you think anything else? Yeah.
I think it's both. I think it's not.
See, that's why I think it.
I think it's the whole point is to get regular people fighting each other, right?
Yeah.
It distracts. It keeps people class collaborationist rather than engaged in class struggle. It keeps people factionalized.
So then we should be explaining to the homophobes why they should stop being homophobes and unite with the people.
Always. You're always supposed to do that.
Sure,
You're always supposed to do that. Every time you meet a homophobe, you have to tell them that. Yeah, of course. You don't just go,
like, you can't, one, you have, there's a good way to go about it and a bad way. But two, I think the opinions of people generally change through actual action rather than just being told, right? In my we have like a sort of little pseudo union at my shop. There's a couple gay dudes and then a couple people who say gay slurs left and right, but they organized within the same union because it was in their interest, so they were engaged in class struggle together. Right,
Mike, you gotta have the homophobes in there too. I guess. Sorry,
I guess in that
situation,
that's fine.
We can't just
wish that
we can't just kill them.
I also think I don't know. I wouldn't compare it to the civil rights revolution. That was a really different thing. Like KKK, like fascism, like genuine fascism in alliance with the industrialists. Like that broke the first ever dictatorship of the proletariat in history. That's monumental that happened, right? Like people talk about the Paris Commune, but the first dictatorship of the proletariat was in Reconstruction in certain U.S. southern states, right? The Freedmen's Bureaus were proletarian organizations backed up by the Union Army. I recommend for anyone listening to read W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction in America. It's one of the best books ever written. It's the same sort of dialectical brilliance that Marx brings to capital, but in the particular situation of the U.S. It explains racism and the color line and class struggle in American history. It's fantastic.
W.E.B. Du Bois, people. Check him out. Du Bois. Yeah. This is good stuff. Well, Mike's here to keep it spicy. He always he must have saw some homophobic comments, and he saw something in the comment section. He's like, I don't like that. So these guys are just a bunch of homophobes.
Don't take it personally, Noah. And I'm glad I can have conversations with people and they remain civil. Like that's what I'm trying to do lately. Because
this is what my show is about. That I'm trying to talk Mike down. Last time he was calling this guy, "You're a fucking Nazi asshole." And I'm like, take it easy.
I call the guy white, and I'm white.
Yeah, white boy. No, it was actually good, but no.
I grew up on the east side of Cleveland. That was basically my nickname growing up.
What's that? They called me Pinche Wedo. I went to an all Mexican school. I was like the only white kid. Pinche Wedo. Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, I think you should go after these demographics. I think you don't leave anybody behind, because by the time you convince them of communism, you'll also be able to convince them that of all kinds of other things to enlighten them. But knowing that human beings are totally flawed, totally stupid, slow to learn, I've tried to grab people by the hair and shove their nose in their own shit for years, and it doesn't work. And it never work for me either. When I went vegan, I just watched my wife be vegan for like 4 years. I'm like, yeah. But she never forced me. She never said. And eventually I came to it on my own, and it felt like it was my own. And because I did it hard, and I did it with pride, and I never looked back. Rather than having somebody say, you're a fucking asshole, right? For not, you shouldn't eat animals because it's not nice. Like, that doesn't work. And I love yelling at people. It's my second favorite thing to do next to smoking weed. It's my favorite thing to do. it doesn't get you anywhere. You lose a lot of friends. And so this is my favorite format, because if you guys piss me off, I'll just close the lid. It's easier. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody goes to jail. Things like that. But yeah, I mean, humans. This is my ultimate thing. Noah gets steeped in theory. Mike gets steeped in theory about communism. Got all these things. Me, I just stand back and I go, you know what? Even communism, capitalism, I'm not even sure any of it will work, because the inherent flaws and how we are, it's not pretty,
Species being,
guys.
bro.
I mean, you solve communism, and then tell me about the microplastics, the PFAS, the glyphosate, the other stuff that we're not going to be able to just get rid of so easily. And also, you communists, how do you get around that motivation to work? Because I was just talking to my wife today. I said, you know what? Getting people, Kwame Ture, the great Stokely Carmichael would say, you have to do it for humanity, not for some material. What motivates you should be service to humanity, not this, not every gizmo and like.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, I'm a little skeptical about that, because I think humans might need some kind of motivation beyond just the, this esoteric, for the good of, like, I think in a lot of ways when the Soviet Union fell apart, there was probably a lot of disillusionment with bureaucrats who just said, I come in, no matter what kind of job I do, I get paid. And so you get some aspects of mediocrity. So I want to ask you, how do you circumvent and solve the issue of motivation? I'll ask both of you. I want both your answers. How do you solve the motivation issue?
I want to hear Noah's answer. Noah's the theory guy.
Sure.
Come on, buddy.
I think I'll throw another quote at you from another great communist, Gus Hall, who was chairman of the Communist Party USA for decades. And he said that people don't respond to commands or exhortations. They don't respond to ideas. They don't even respond to good ideas unless they see their self-interest reflected in those ideas. That's what it is. Communism is in our interests. And I think that's how you get support. You have to delineate between people who are going to be revolutionaries and actually have the drive and discipline and passion to engage in helping their country, helping humanity, helping their neighborhood, or even just their family, whatever it is. You have to draw a line between these people that become Communist Party cadre or whatever formation the vanguard takes, and then support, a base of support. There's hundreds of millions of people in this country, just like there were in Russia during the October Revolution. They weren't all Bolsheviks. Regarding the fall of the Soviet Union, there was plenty of incentive, but there was a lot of other issues with it. I would recommend, there's a book called Socialism Betrayed by Roger Kieran and, oh God, I forget the guy's name. Kenny. It's the go-to analysis of why the Soviets fell. Like the Chinese Communist Party studies it religiously now. They're making a new edition in Chinese, actually. But yeah. What do you think, Mike?
More just like I don't know the ins and outs of the Soviet Union or the bureaucracy well enough to know how people felt towards the end of it, or to say I just don't think that that's the reason. I don't think it had anything to do with like what the working class opinions were on socialism or the Soviet Union, as evidenced by like the polls that I always see about like what the workers wanted. Like they didn't want the Soviet Union to end. That was forced upon them by the ruling class, and again, sort of like a color revolution from the outside, ending the Soviet Union that way, but. Not to relitigate the whole fucking ending of the Soviet Union again. But
yeah, you communists love to. Wait a minute. Yeah. I heard.
But then also looking back, like the way people look back on communism in previous socialist states, like they still view it favorably. And for whatever disillusionment they may have had at the time, after they experienced capitalism, they wanted to go back. Like they were like, oh, as bad as it was, like we still were able to get our basic necessities without having to work as hard. And for whatever people say about like what people would or wouldn't tolerate under a different system, it's like people are tolerating a lot right now under capitalism. And if you didn't have the elite ruling class sucking up the labor that the people are producing, people wouldn't have to work so much. So it might sound alien to us to think of scrubbing the toilet for the good of your country. But if you only had to do it for 4 hours a week, and then all your basic needs were met, and then you had all the rest of your free time to like do the things you actually want to do, like then that becomes a little more believable. It's like if you don't have that ruling class sucking the cream off the top, like literally being leeches on all your labor, you can do great things when you actually run economies well, like for the benefit of the workers and democratically.
Yeah, I think that if you juxtaposed, right, if you knew how bad it was before, and then you'd be like, well, I only have to work 4 hours every day. But then if you do it like for 6 generations, they'll start questioning it and say, maybe we should try something different. Maybe we should, no, it's interesting. I was worried about the motivation question. How do you motivate the people? It's like carrots and sticks, I guess, is the old thing.
There's a joke from a Russian joke from the late 90s as things like were really bad that they said very dry Russian humor. Everything they told us about communism was a lie, but everything they told us about capitalism was true.
It's a very good one.
Yeah, these things time will tell and stuff. I've come around actually quite a bit. I think I'm fully communist in some way, where I think any amount of communism that you can inject into the current system will be desperately needed and appreciated,
You just got to remember, it's all in the service of withering away the state. Like, we are anarchists at heart too. We just have a programmatic and systematic way of getting there, and it looks authoritarian in the meantime.
Wasn't one of the issues was the central planning of everything and the strict quotas and like the really strictness of it all when you guys were supposed to be getting down to abolishing the state eventually, right?
That's why a lot of communists say that they solved that with socialism with Chinese characteristics now, but
I think there's a lot of issues with Soviet planning, but what seems to work really well is the Chinese model for the Chinese, and I think something similar will happen here in the US. Like Mike was saying before, there's this sort of individualist part of our ideology just as Americans, as who we are, right? And it's just baked into how we think, whether we want it to be there or not, right? And that comes through in what Stalin called American grit, right? Or pioneer spirit, he said. And you can sort of segue that into a thriving small business sector, unlike what we have now, where 80% of them fail in the first year or get, gobbled up by one of the monopolies. And even when you get one, you're already selling your soul to finance capital just to get that investment, right? In communism, that's not necessary, right? You have an actual national bank that's there to provide credit for actual productive industry, especially in luxury goods like in China and tech and all that kind of stuff. But I don't remember what the question was anymore.
No, I know the communism. What style? How much? What style of communism you like, and how much you need? We were talking about the Soviet system versus everything else, and people get all up in arms. They say, hey, communism, gulags, blah, and then I just go, what about China? And then they go, no comment.
Uyghurs.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, the Uyghurs and they're oppressed and stuff. And then I've had to reprogram my own stuff about all these people.
How do they believe there's a genocide with zero evidence for it? Right. And
no
then
video,
when you get
no
videos
images
every single day of one actually happening, they're like, that's not real. Amazing.
Right? Yeah. Look, we went over time, guys. Wonderful to have you guys here. Always great. Midwestern Marx, Noah Khrachvik. His name is impossible to spell, but he's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Anything you want to add before we go, Noah?
We have a few things coming up in the future, so stay tuned for that. I have a pamphlet coming out soon. There's other big things. Just stay tuned to the Midwestern Marx Institute. There's a lot of good stuff coming.
All right. And, of course, Mike from Turn Leftist, he just had his account banned on Instagram. What's going on, man? Tell me a story. Yeah. What are you going to say before you go?
Just follow me on Turn Leftist 3. That's the one I'm using now. And then you can find my podcast on all the podcast feeds, the Turn Leftist podcast. But good to talk to you, Noah. It was a great conversation. And I hope that it is true that, like, the Haas and Hinkle fanboys are not as, like, bigoted or homophobic as they seem at first glance, and hopefully they are not the new Strasserist movement and they actually are like a working class movement. But I'll reserve hope. I mean, either way, it was good to talk to you about it in a civil way. So
we're communists and we hate chicks with dicks. That's the new thing. Come
Speak for
on,
yourself,
guys, relax. All right, everybody, we'll sign off. You guys stick around. I'm going to end it here.